So I'm Steve Thayer. I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm one of the instructors with Numinus for our psychedelic-assisted therapy training program. I started my career in the United States military. I was an Air Force psychologist for the first few years of my career. Quickly decided that wasn't for me. Got out and discovered all the cool research being done in psychedelic-assisted therapy and medicine. Was fortunate enough to be able to pivot my career that direction, and yeah, have been working in the clinical trial space, in the teaching and instruction and supervision space, and then also in private practice ever since then. So it's a pleasure to be with you.
Thanks, Steve. All right, Ray, you want to go next?
Yeah. My name is Ray Rivas. I'm the founder and owner of Inner Bloom Ketamine Therapy. We're an IV ketamine clinic focusing on ketamine-assisted psychotherapy. My career started as a trauma surgeon. I practiced for many years, over 10 years. And as a trauma surgeon, I was actually exposed to ketamine. So I was very interested on how well it worked for pain and anxiety. I had personal issues with my mental health and underwent a series of infusions, and it was very life-changing for me. So I pivoted careers, left surgery about 2 years ago now, and now I'm just 100% a ketamine specialist.
Awesome. And last but certainly not least, Cindy, if you can introduce yourself.
My name is Cindy. I am a LMFT working with Ray at Inner Bloom. So I am the independent contractor therapist that pairs the infusions with the psychotherapy part. I was a hairdresser for 18 years, so I made a lateral move to being a therapist and worked mostly with substance use, a stint with foster care, and mostly working with heroin, alcoholic kind of issues going on. Then I retired from the county, started a private practice, met Ray, did my own infusions, moved out of private practice. So I'm mainly working with him right now.
Awesome. So as you can see, we're in very good hands with our panel today and talking about building careers in this space. To warm us up a little bit, and we're going to be using the raise your hand feature in Teams. So if you will, on your bar on the top, you should see something that looks like a little hand with the raise. I'm just going to ask some basic questions. If technology is not your friend and you're on camera, please, the old-fashioned, just putting up your hand absolutely works for me as well. So we'll start off with an easy one. Do you have any personal or professional experience with psychedelics? So this is for everyone in the audience. If you have any personal or professional experience with psychedelics, if you could raise your hand. Lovely. Lots of experience here. So, and this is also really helpful for us to make sure that we tailor this agenda to the experience base in the room. So seeing lots of experience in the room here. Thanks for joining. Second question, if you want to lower your hand now, I'm going to move on to the second one. Have you started or completed a training program in psychedelics previously or currently? Okay, seeing a little bit less folks, so perhaps we're earlier in our stages of exploration for a psychedelic career. Okay, very last one. Put your hands back down. Are you interested in setting up your own psychedelic practice or making psychedelic practice part of the work that you do or provide to clients? Right, lots. So we have tailored the right panel for you to walk through this session. We'll make sure we have a good chunk there to talk about how to do that and the advice from our Inner Bloom folks that are joining us today. All right, you can put your hands down. Thanks for warming up with us. We're going to go right into the section on the current state of psychedelic-assisted therapy. So now I'm going to pass it over to Steve. And Steve, I'm probably going to spotlight you so folks can see you, so don't be alarmed. But could you please walk us through a brief overview of where we're at with psychedelics, the state of research, kind of where you see it going, and maybe some of the sense of optimism of what we're seeing in the psychedelic space today?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Yeah, thanks for the warning about spotlighting. That is always alarming to get spotlighted. So psychedelics, some of you probably know a lot about the history of psychedelics and psychedelic medicine and research, some of you not so much, but they've gone on a sort of an interesting journey. Back in the 50s and 60s, when psychedelic medicines like psilocybin and LSD were being studied at university and hospitals and in labs, to the Controlled Substances Act of 1970 that put most of those drugs on Schedule 1 and made them illegal. Later in the 80s, when MDMA got placed on Schedule 1, a lot of the research funding and projects dried up. So we had this psychedelic research desert, in spite of the promise that some of the research and clinical work being done with psychedelics. Yeah, we had sort of this research and practice desert, although a lot of work being done with psychedelics in the so-called underground in the interim. And then, 15 years or so ago, you saw psychedelics slowly finding their way back into the lab. And then just recently, we have had a lot more research and a lot more public interest as both funding agencies, regulatory agencies changing opinions, softening up about the potential use of psychedelics to treat what has been referred to as a mental health epidemic that we're dealing with in the modern world. So now we have several publicly traded companies. I looked it up just a minute ago. Since 2020, over $4 billion have been invested in psychedelic research. A recent poll of psychiatrists showed 80% of surveyed psychiatrists agreed that psychedelics showed promise as a revolutionary mental health treatment. And then a UC Berkeley poll that I just dug up, of the people surveyed, 61% of your average Americans, those surveyed, supported legalizing psychedelics for therapeutic use. So, I was a child of the 80s and 90s, grew up with the DARE campaign and Just Say No to Drugs. And there are certainly many drugs that one should just say no to. But this I remember hearing as a kid that LSD would make your brain swell and you would have cerebral spinal fluid drip down your spine, and that's what caused the high. And, as a 12-year-old thinking, wow, that sounds pretty terrible. It's nice now as a professional in the field to see public sentiment changing, and a focus on really thorough, really good research. So yeah, I think there's a lot of promise. We want to make sure we do it right and we don't have a backlash from a regulatory perspective like we did back in the 70s. But I think, everybody in attendance today is a testament to how excited people are for how psychedelics can really, really help.
Amazing. Thanks, Steve. Now we're going to kind of follow that thread a little bit. And Ray, I'm going to come over to you. So thinking about psychedelics broadly, what's your why for being involved in this space? Like, what gets you excited about psychedelics in the future ahead of us?
Yeah, so psychedelics in general, it's a very evolving field. It's very exciting to be part of it. It requires me to constantly do research. I feel like every day there's just new papers coming out. I have to kind of distill that information and potentially even change the way I practice. Again, this is much different from my prior career as a surgeon. There's only so many techniques you can learn, whereas psychedelics, there's really not a right way and a wrong way. So, I mean, obviously we don't want to do any harm, but yeah, it's just exciting to see this field grow. I really love the fact that it's a very supportive community. Typically, people who are in the psychedelic space have very interesting why. They typically really want to make a difference, and they want to make sure that we do this correctly, avoid harm, avoid setbacks. So that's really what gets me very interested.
Amazing. What about you, Cindy? What's your why?
My why is personal, really. It's my own experience. So not unlike Steve, I've grown up in the, drug and alcohol world, and ketamine was like, oh my gosh, what are these people doing? And then I kind of hooked up with Ray, and he felt and looked a little not sketchy and pretty well read. And I just went in cold turkey and did the whole 6 infusions. Cold turkey, no prep, no nothing, just read, the website and everything. And it was so extremely life-changing for me. And the why for me is because if it did for me what I've been stuck with for, a lot of my adult life, just went boom. And I don't mean it's like a magic pill, because I've done just so much work up to that point, but it was such a catalyst for me. And then I just dove right in, did all, learned as much as I could, told Ray at my 6th infusion, hey, I'll come work with you. I'll do whatever you want. And so that's really the why for me, is if it worked for me like this, then what could it possibly do for other people?
Oh, I appreciate the personal sharing and sentiments on that, Cindy. Thank you. Now, if we come back to the why, but more focused on our clients and our patients, Steve, I'll pass this one over to you first. Do you have a story or a particular client that you've treated using psychedelics that really sticks out to you that, again, resonates that why, that this is an important tool that we have in our toolbox and the future ahead?
Yeah, I've been given permission to share this particular story. I'm going to change details anyway to maintain this person's privacy. But I've had a lot of those experiences. And one of the things that excites me about psychedelics is what we think are psychedelic assisted therapy's ability to help treat what have been difficult to treat conditions historically and traditionally. So this particular individual was struggling with a lot of childhood trauma and an eating disorder, lifelong eating disorder. Um, and she had been through a lot of treatment, very, very intelligent, very, very resourceful, had accomplished a lot, but suffered tremendously. And we were doing ketamine assisted therapy. And in one of her ketamine experiences, she had a very visionary type experience, which not everybody has on ketamine, but she had a very psychedelic experience on ketamine. And one of her visions was she saw her female ancestors, mother, grandmother, great grandmother, and then she saw herself and her daughter in sort of this timeline of generational trauma connected by this ribbon of light. And she saw the ribbon of light go through her grandmother, her mother, and it was this sort of negative body image and eating disorder defense that was being passed down from generation to generation. And when it hit her and she saw her daughter, she saw that it was her opportunity and responsibility to break the chain. And not only that didn't just occur to her in her mind, but under the influence of ketamine, she felt it in her body. She felt it in the way she described it, her soul. And it really impressed upon her the power that she had to break that chain and motivated her to do so. It wasn't just about her survival, it wasn't just about her well-being. It was about the survival and well-being of her daughter. And I wish I could say that after that ketamine experience, all was well. She still struggled, but she made incredible improvements after that. So that's one of many examples I could give of people's transformational experiences with psychedelics like ketamine.
Wow. All right, Ray, coming over to you, your client story that you'd like to share of that helps resonate your why.
Yeah, I had this one client present to us with a complaint of PTSD. She suffered childhood trauma, witnessed a traumatic event at a very young age. And as we dug deeper into her story, she mentioned that she'd been suffering from nightly nightmares for the past 35 years. So bad that it would require hours in the morning of self-care, kind of, calming herself down before she could actually start her actual day. Her intention, seeing us was dressed as childhood trauma, not necessarily the nightmares. That's something that we discovered later. But after her very first infusion, her nightmares stopped. And that persisted, and it has persisted over a year now for her. And she's obviously, she improved in from other avenues. She also has depression, but I thought that was pretty amazing that something could stop that, where she has obviously tried many things. I've been to therapists, and she actually was a therapist in training, so she knew quite a bit about the process and was very invested in it. But yeah, that was just a pretty amazing, remarkable story.
Yeah, for sure. Wow. And Cindy, your client story that you'd like to share.
Oh, this was like, they just warm your heart so much. So, a lot of complex trauma, childhood trauma, really high functioning. And in one of her journeys, she lot of primary care ruptures in attachment, like not a whole lot of adult kind of positive stuff. One of her experiences was being like a 3-month-old infant curled up in the crook of her grandfather's neck right here. She could smell the pipe of his smoking his pipe. And she said, all I could feel was, that's the safest I've ever felt in my entire life. And that safeness, just like what Steve had said, went right in here. It's like, it wasn't just like a cerebral type of a thing. She just really felt it. And it's so funny because they talk in like kind of matter of fact, ways like, oh, I saw this and I did this and this is what I felt. And it's those things that are just what they kind of don't see as that critical. So, we just kind of stop there. So that one was really precious. And Ray knows we've had like one person, it was so crazy. They fell, injured themselves in their face, and it took away their sense of smell. So they haven't smelled for years, and he smelled all through his journey. Like, how does that work? I have no idea, but this is crazy.
All really powerful stories. I appreciate you sharing those. We're going to transition now more into the career opportunities. So we're going to come back to Steve. And Steve, you kind of set the stage with the amount of kind of investment that's now happened in the industry. But maybe we can go now further into the jobs available. Can you speak to a little bit of like, from your experience, the growth and like demand of practitioners or folks who want to work in psychedelic assisted therapy, even specifically to like the work you're doing in clinical research, the number of studies that you've had to or got the pleasure of participating in, and the number of clinic staff that you've been interacting with and needing to work with in order to deliver these. So yeah, any insights you have into kind of this growing demand in this field?
It is growing, and I will say that we don't know exactly what shape it will take. Right, we're at a really interesting time in the development of this particular industry based on a revolutionary new way of doing mental health treatment. Um, organizations like the FDA have a really interesting challenge of approving drugs that are being studied in combination with psychological support or psychotherapy. So we don't know exactly what shape it's going to take. We have a good guess based on clinics like Ray's and Cindy's with ketamine, where therapists, professional helpers can have an opportunity to help people through their ketamine experiences, prepare them for those experiences, in some cases sit with them and assist them through those experiences, and then help them integrate those experiences into their daily lives or to address the problem that brought them to treatment. And that structure that I just outlined, where in the context of therapy, you have preparation, medicine, and integration sessions, is what we hope is going to be the way that psychedelic assisted therapy shows up in clinic. I say hope because I think that's probably the most robust way to do it. And it is the way it's being studied. So my experience in a variety of different clinical trials approaching this, each one fairly differently, has still followed that general arc, that general structure. So I think there might be opportunities if you are a prescribing provider to be involved in that particular role, prescribing the medicine. There are opportunities as a professional licensed therapist to be involved. But even for folks who aren't licensed, some of these studies are trying to reduce the potential costs of accessing this kind of care by saying that, maybe you'll have a co-therapy team where the lead therapist is a licensed therapist, but the assistant doesn't necessarily have to have a license. They have to go through a specific training program. And that maybe that will lower the cost burden on those, lower the expense for those providing the care so that the cost for the consumer or, the potential clients is also lower. So there's the clinic side. I mentioned the research side. Many companies continuing to do psychedelic research. It is a growing industry. And so not that there's a ton of opportunities, but there are opportunities to get involved in clinical trial research. And then the retreat space as well. I find it's a little tragic that people often have to leave the United States to go get treatment in places where it is legal. Hopefully that's changing soon. But there are opportunities to get involved in psychedelic therapy retreats outside the country. Rick Doblin, the founder of the organization MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, is quoted as saying that he feels like, at least for MDMA, assisted therapy for PTSD, which is what their organization has done research around, that they're going to need somewhere around 25,000 new therapists trained by 2030. So there's definitely going to be high demand and opportunity for people who are interested.
Absolutely. And thanks for clarifying the licensed therapist versus the sitter role question as well. I feel like I get that question all the time is what is the role for folks who want to do more medicine sitting or trip sitting, if you will? And is there a future there? And from what we're seeing from professionals like Rick Doblin, it seems like that's going to be the future of developing co-therapy teams. Ray, I'm going to come over to you now. Maybe you can walk us through a little bit of how you structured your clinic in terms of the healthcare professionals and others that you've hired in order to operate a clinic like yours, and just give insights into kind of like the diversity and how interdisciplinary this work can be.
Yeah, so I can kind of walk through the staff. We're pretty small. We only do 4 infusions per day, 4 days a week. And the staff includes myself, the physician, and my role is really to, talk to the patients initially as a consultation, educate them, screen them for, if they're appropriate candidate, whatnot. And then during their infusion, I place the IV. I sit through every single medicine session with them. And then other members of our team include Cindy. Cindy sees clients ideally first. So we believe very heavily on the preparation integration portion of this, the ketamine-assisted psychotherapy. We do utilize psychedelic doses, not psycholytics, so we separate the two. They're on separate days. So ideally, clients will see Cindy first, and that's a preparation session, helping them set intentions, helping them understand the difference between expectations, intentions, and kind of what to expect somewhat. Obviously, it's going to be different. A lot of people that we treat are naive to psychedelics, so it's a lot of education, a lot of prep work. And sometimes it's not just a single prep session, sometimes it's multiple. And then it's a series of 6 infusions. We follow evidence-based protocols. There's a induction phase, typically 6 infusions, sometimes we extend it. And then there's the maintenance phase, and that's the as-needed infusions, or we call them boosters. And then as far as the ongoing psychotherapy, the ideal scenario is that patients have a therapy session with CD after each infusion. We don't always achieve that at the bare minimum. Typically see Cindy 2 more times. And then typically a lot of patients that we see also have therapists as well. So we love to collaborate with them. Big part of our job is education. Our community is pretty small, so a lot of them don't know about ketamine or psychedelics. So we're constantly inviting therapists to our space, networking with them and other providers in the community as well, psychiatrists, pain specialists. So this is a team approach, and it's important, I think, to recognize that that for someone starting a psychedelic clinic or business, that this takes some time to get out there, to meet members in your community so they trust you, so they actually meet you, and that's how you get the referrals, and that's how you get that trust. So yeah, and then as far as other members, so I'm lucky enough to have my fiance on the team too. She's the voice behind the phone. She's a clinic manager. She does the social media, all that. And then we have a therapy dog too, or we call her a therapy dog, but she's a golden retriever who's typically present for each infusion. That helps a big, people, we joke about it, but it helps big time for people to kind of break the ice and to help them, through some of these difficult journeys, because some of them are very challenging for them. They need to be grounded some way. They have some grounding techniques, or just, having a dog present can make a huge difference. And that's it. And then actually, besides that, so we also recognize that, the integration work doesn't necessarily end after just the induction phase. And sometimes clients will need to do more, or they'll want to do more integration work after. And it's nice to have other specialists who understand the medicine. So we have Elisa is in our work as well. So ideally, clients will go through the process with us, with Cindy, and then if they wish to do more integration work, then we will pass these patients on to her and continue therapy.
And a shout out to Elisa, who's on the line right now. Thanks for joining us, Elisa. I know you're an important part of their clinic as well. Ray, just to clarify, you currently don't have any nurses on staff with your clinic. I know nurses can play a pretty big role in some of these clinics as well.
Yeah, so when I first opened up Interbloom, it was just myself and a nurse. And to be fully honest, it was because I had never placed an IV. So I had a nurse to help with that, but I still sat through all the infusions. I quickly learned, from a financial standpoint, it just made more sense for myself to learn how to place an IV. I'm very comfortable doing other procedures, surgical procedures, so I quickly learned how to do that. And it feels, yeah, we don't have an RN or anyone else other than the team members that I mentioned.
Yeah. And I guess I'll say, like, for other folks that are considering opening a clinic or whatnot, or adding it on, I know nurses have played a critical role. Both we've seen obviously with medication administration and kind of medical monitoring, but also we've seen like LPNs, et cetera, do really good psychedelic assisted therapy work as well. And they've been trained to do kind of the full arc of psychedelic assisted therapy. So wanted to cover that because I get that question a lot on my end. Cindy, I'm going to come over to you, kind of a surprise question. So I'm sorry if you want to pass this, but I really want to dig more into this like kind of co-therapy model. What do you think about this model in the future of having like someone like yourself licensed who's done psychedelic assisted therapy training and then partnering with someone who perhaps comes from a diverse background, but can really provide a lot of other diverse skills and be in the room, maybe make the price point a little bit more accessible, but have a lot to give in terms of being there as a medicine sitter in the room with you? What do you think about this kind of like co-therapy team idea and model?
I am all for team. I think team is the most important. So you're talking about diverse, like the people that we work with within the community, correct?
Yeah. So, or like let's just say like a medicine sitter, someone who, again, maybe they come from a coaching background, but again, have been profoundly impacted by psychedelics and want to be able to do some of the medicine sitting work with folks and be kind of that supportive voice in the room to help them through. What do you think about that role being with you in the room?
Yes, 100%. I am, like, and Libby will sit as well. I'm just going to give a shout out to Libby, and she will sit with Ray. And so we talk a lot about kind of what goes on in there. She'll be a really good sounding board for me to let me know what's happening with, the clients. Anybody that has done any like internal work in terms of being able to be a sit and be present, just be a present person, and also just not talk too much, which is a problem with me. So anybody that can come in that has a heart to do this, I'm all for it, 100%. I know Elisa has sat with a lot of her clients as a therapist. I've had the opportunity to sit with a bunch of clients, like when my schedule will work out, and I will scribe for them. If they want to or not, I'll scribe for them and give them, their all their words and what they brought up, and then it's good information for us to work on. But I say the more the merrier. I hope that they lessen the stringent roles of having to have, too many letters behind your name to get out there. If you've got the experience and you've got the heart, I'm for it.
Beautifully said. If anybody on the webinar is interested more in that medicine sitting role, I would say Oregon is doing the best kind of work with mapping this out and how they work together for specifically psilocybin assisted therapy. So my recommendation to you would be to check out Oregon Health Authority and Oregon's kind of trip sitter roles and what that looks like in that state. I'm going to move us now into the day in the life section of this webinar. I'm going to come back to you, Ray, and I know you've kind of given us some sneak peeks into Inner Bloom and what you're up to, but can you give us kind of like a rundown of like coming into the clinic, what your day looks like, how you're working with clients, how you've prepared clients, any kind of insights you can give to what a day in the life looks like for you and the work that you do at the clinic?
Yeah. On paper, I'm working 4 days a week, but in reality, it's 24/7. I wake up really early and just read every day. I have Google alerts kind of showing me what's the latest as far as ketamine, what's the latest in psychedelics. So I spend a couple hours each morning just reading what people are saying and new research. And then I come into the clinic at 9. Libby and I do, and Ellie is the golden retriever. And then we do, again, 4 infusions per day at most. And they're 2-hour time slots. They're 40-minute infusions. Again, I sit in the room for every infusion, and Libby does as well for the female clients. And then sometimes the therapist will come as well and sit. And then, patients are typically in the clinic for about an hour, hour and a half, so a little bit of recovery period. So we're open 4 days a week, but on Mondays, one day a week, we leave open for kind of emergencies, last minute infusions, boosters, or just business work. Obviously, this being a startup, there's there's a lot to be done, owning a business and whatnot. So I like, sitting and doing the infusions is one part, but the vast majority of my time is really doing the research, writing. I'm constantly writing to mainly to educate myself. That's the one way I've learned, going through medical school and whatnot, is just taking notes. Writing helps me understand it, and then, teaching it to or sharing that with my patients. That's just a big role that I take.
A follow-up question for you, Ray. Can you talk a little bit about the different services you provide? I'm not sure if you have like different, I don't want to say packages, but like options for clients, like the different, I guess, services that you can provide for someone who's searching ketamine.
Yeah, we typically recommend the series of infusions, a series of 6 infusions. Very, very rarely do we do one-off infusions. If we do, they're for people in their maintenance phase coming back. We utilize majority of our sessions are intravenous. Sometimes we'll do intramuscular for those people who have difficult access and they have an aversion to needles, or sometimes some people prefer it. They prefer the experience, a little bit different of experience. But yeah, just IV IM is what we do.
Awesome. Cindy, can you walk me through your kind of day in the life? What does your typical day look like? And I'm sure you have some very similar overlaps with Ray, but if you could paint that picture for us, that's awesome.
Yep, a day in my life would be like Libby when she does the scheduling. I get my appointments also. So everything is in a package and does the scheduling. So I have them on my my calendar for like a prep session before. So when they come in before their series in a prep session, and it's pretty interesting because they can come in for a prep session and go, yeah, my first infusion's right after you. Okay. So I kind of, just kind of really work with them to do their intentions and setting and grounding and how are you feeling about going in. So it's a little bit different each time when I see them. So I will have like therapy naive people, psychedelic naive people, and so my prep session really is education, education, education. I do a lot of that in that first one. So we do education. I give them the basics of kind of what's happening in their brain, the neuroplasticity, the neurogenesis. I quickly remind them that all of their, their journeys are going to keep going and keep unfolding because they're very anxious about what if I don't get it all in these 6 infusions. So I try to educate them that way. I work a lot on what to do after. I talk about that a lot, like how to maintain this. Are you in therapy? Are you not in therapy? How can we keep maintaining your progress here? So the first one is the prep and to kind of give them psychoeducation. The second one, they will have had a few infusions, and then what I'll do is let them talk to me about their infusions. And because I know I'm not going to see them for a long period of time, or if they don't have therapy, I kind of will pick out stuff. I know we're not supposed to make interpretations about what their journeys are, but like with what Steve talks about in the integration is I'll pick out ketamine signatures. Like as they're going, I'm writing stuff down, and then I'll pick those out, talk to them about them, and see the things that rise to the top. What rises to the top? What is that? I will work a lot with helping them to notice versus judgment versus making any kind of, which is really hard for most of my clients because they want a beginning and an end, and what am I doing? Am I doing it right? So a lot of it is just to alleviate their anxiety and to surrender and curiosity, noticing, surrender, curiosity. And we also have a little booklet that we give to people that can help, walk them through that. And then after that second one, and we'll talk a lot about challenges, we'll talk a lot about like the aha moments and then the subtle moments of the changes. I'll try to pick up on those. And then we'll see each other after the 6th infusion. And we'll kind of just go overall, like what was your overall sense? What was your overall takeaway? Just kind of try to wrap it up. But the whole entire time I'm encouraging like outside therapy. I used to be really I don't want to push people. I don't want them to do anything that they're not comfortable in doing, but I really have found myself putting like, okay, whatever you can do to maintain, like again, what Steve says, whatever you will do and follow through, and then a healthy lifestyle, those things are going to go a long way. But I do really, really encourage therapy. And I will always send them, like through the text, I will always send them referrals to like only 3 people that I know that will integrate their journeys. So that's kind of, it's a lot of psychoeducation for me, and just really encouraging them to reach out and get therapy that works on that non-ordinary site. Like if they have their own therapist, but they're just doing talk therapy, I will send them Steve and Reed's podcast on how to integrate a ketamine journey. So I say, give this to your therapist. It'll give them a really good basis and outline of kind of where to go with that. So that's my life.
Such important work, and I love the shameless plug for the Psychedelic Frontiers podcast. Go listen. Steve is one of the co-hosts. Yeah, I love that. Steve, I'm going to come over to you. The tricky part about this question is that you wear so many hats with us at Numinus, but if you can paint a little bit of the picture for the different hats you wear, what a day in the life looks like for you.
Yeah, thanks for the plug, Cindy. I guess that's why that episode is our most downloaded episode. This single-handedly, Cindy is making us popular. Thank you. Yeah, I'll sort of, my disclaimer here about my day in the life is I'm very privileged to have a very bespoke, like custom-made career in psychedelics. So each day in my life can vary quite a bit depending on what I'm doing. But just in the interest of time, I might be involved in one of our training programs that we offer here at Numinus. So I might be co-facilitating those courses, those modules for people enrolled in our training programs. I might be a facilitator in a clinical trial, which could mean I'm showing up to do preparation or orientation sessions for clinical trial participants, or I might be doing 8 to 12 hour medicine sessions, double-blind placebo-controlled medicine sessions, or integration sessions for clinical trial participants. I might be meeting with one of my private practice clients where I do, psychotherapy, but I also do psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. This might be people who I've arranged to get ketamine prescriptions and treatment, and then they come to me for prep and integration, or I'm with them during their ketamine treatments through our Numinus clinics. Or these are people who have found access to psychedelic medicines elsewhere, and they've come to me for help in preparation and integration. I also am a mentor and trainer for study therapists involved with a company called Compass Pathways. They're doing psilocybin-assisted treatment studies right now for major depressive disorder, treatment-resistant depression. So I teach and train their therapists how to do that. Or I might be setting up shop with my friend Reed and recording a podcast episode to release to our small audience of people who are interested in all things psychedelics. So yeah, a lot of irons and a lot of fires. Sometimes I sleep too.
I'm glad you're sleeping, but I love how diverse your work is. And I feel like also, Steve, I don't want to speak for you, but I feel like all of those pieces are just so, they work really well together. I feel like your training makes you a better practitioner, and your clinical research that you do also makes you a better practitioner, and you can share all of that knowledge through the work that you do on the podcast. So it seems like they're all very interconnected, and makes good sense. I'm going to move us into training, and Steve, I'm going to stay on you here. So get ready. We were talking at the very beginning, and we made this point pretty clear when you're talking about the research about how important it is to get this work or do this work in a good way and get it right. And I just wonder if you could speak a little bit to, just even with your own, your hat as a training instructor, the role that quality training plays in making sure that we have the rigor and skills required to do this work in a good way.
Yeah. I remember when I was getting trained in MDMA-assisted therapy through MAPS, I was at the Drawla Mountain Center in Colorado, and our instructors were talking about this. And Marcela Odalora, one of the MDMA therapy instructors, said that there is a high bar for practitioners to leap over to do this work. And I went up there and sort of talked to her about it afterward, what she meant. Cindy mentioned that one of the most important things for somebody who is a practitioner in this work is their presence. And sometimes we call that therapeutic presence. That's something that is that can be coached. There are skills related to that. It's also something that is kind of characterological, and a lot of people are drawn to this work because they have that kind of presence about them. They've been told that they're a good listener. They've been told that they make people feel safe. So that's a really, really important thing. To identify that in yourself, connect it to your why you're doing this, and then to learn skills that amplify that tendency towards safe and empathic presence. But people who seek psychedelic assisted therapy are often people who've tried a lot of other things. They're often people who are fairly desperate and people who are very vulnerable. And depending on the way they react to the psychedelic medicine, they can be made even more vulnerable. And sometimes that's the active ingredient. When vulnerability is held with safety, sometimes breakthroughs can occur. But we need to make sure that we are ethical in our practice, that we are trained thoroughly, that we have the skills to hold vulnerability, to hold intensity, that we can tolerate fluctuations in people's connection with reality, with self, and in their mood states, in order to make sure that people are sort of escorted through this journey in prep, medicine, and integration in a way that's optimal. So there are a lot of great training programs out there. Numinus is one of several, I think, that do really, really good job giving people these skills that I'm referencing. It's not something that like facilitating, sitting, call it what you will, is not something to approach casually.
Very good advice. Ray, I'm going to come over to you. You, again, clinic owner, operator, you're prescribing, you're inserting IVs, you're sitting through the medicine sessions. How has training played an important role for you to do the work that you're doing? And perhaps give some insights into training you've taken in the past, and again, how that makes you a stronger provider for clients at Interbloom.
Yeah, so obviously training is a must. Understanding each medicine, you just need to understand as far as, for example, the risks, the contraindications, the screening for appropriate patients, because that's really key. Is not everyone is a candidate, and some people feel very strongly that they are, and you kind of have to not only tell them that they're not, but also help them find help elsewhere. So that's very important to just understand the limitations of psychedelic sciences. As far as training, I know I've done some training myself in regards to specifically like business training, ketamine training. A big shout out to Dr. Sam and Kim Ko. They're the owners of Reset Ketamine. They have a wonderful course for practitioners wanting to start a ketamine clinic. So I couldn't recommend that enough. That's a great program. Obviously, Numinus, I did the fundamentals of psychedelic therapy. That was very helpful as well. But also, like I was mentioned before, this is a very evolving field. There's a lot of experts out there. I definitely encourage people to be involved on online forums. For example, Big Tent Ketamine has been very, very helpful. This is an online forum connecting ketamine providers around the nation, and it's really helpful to and psychedelic science. Was a wonderful conference. A little bit overwhelming. It was very big, but that's a very helpful conference. And so is ASKP, American Society of Ketamine Physicians, a little bit smaller, and that's more geared obviously to ketamine. But for somebody wanting to be involved, I encourage them to be involved with at least one of those, if not all.
Such wise words. Thanks, Ray. Similar question to you, Cindy, but maybe I'll add one extra layer to it. I know we've chatted in the past about how other complementary skill sets can be really helpful. So things like somatic work and embodied inquiry, a course that you just took with us recently. How does that also play into your role at being a stronger psychedelic assisted therapist and the work that you're doing at Interbloom?
This really is a whole different modality from me that what I'm used to, because I'm pretty much a straight talk therapist and didn't really understand, all of the things that went into the non-ordinary states of therapy. So like the trainings I've done is fundamentals, applied. I've done the 3 molecules, all of these from Numinus, the 3 molecules and the embodied inquiry. And so all of these they're all super synergistic with what you're working with like the brain and the neurogenesis and all the stuff going on, coupled with EMDR, IFS. I was listening to a training on a meditation one, going along with psychedelics, and they said they all work on that non-ordinary states side of it, which is EMDR, somatic therapy, hypnosis, neurofeedback, and then of course the meditation and the mindfulness practices. Did I say IFS? Yeah, IFS. And so I just kind of really moved everything over to cramming myself with information on all of that. So I would definitely take that route. Like I tell everybody, if you're getting into this field in the beginning, I would go down these routes. And when I refer people, I will refer people that have some of those skill sets, like Elisa. She's got the somatic, she's got the EMDR, she's got the mindfulness and the IFS piece and portion of it. And I just think that, that's the key part. If you really want to make like really good strides to the end, that's going to be I'm going to be pretty clear about these modalities of therapy.
Great. So I'm going to take us through maybe one more question, because I want to be able to open it up for the questions that you all have. But Steve, Ray introduced this concept of community of practice, getting involved with community forums. What's your hot take on getting involved, again, building community around this space, networking, finding online forums? How has that been helpful for your career thus far? And what would you recommend to those that are listening in on this webinar?
Yeah, I agree that it's important. I also just want to name that it can be really hard, because we're a small community. It can feel big sometimes when you're, like Ray said, at Psychedelic Science in Colorado, and there's 13,000 people crammed into the convention center in Denver. But it is a small community. So I will also endorse the organizations that Ray mentioned. I've really benefited from Big Tent Ketamine. It used to be a Google group. They just moved over to a different platform called Circle, I think. But if you just search, you can find it. ASCAP, like you said. The Psychedelic Medicine Association is another good one. They have a podcast and just great forum and resources, educational resources for both free and there's a few behind the paywall that are great for people. If you're a student, there's an organization called Psychedelic Grad that I refer, like a lot of the undergraduates and the aspiring clinicians that reach out to me, I'll point them to Psychedelic Grad, because it's also forum based and they've got great links to educational resources. There are a few organizations that are trying to plant their flag as sort of regulatory organizations. I can't remember exactly their names off the top of my head, but trying to give guidance and structure to the way that psychedelic-assisted therapy and psychedelic medicine should be held to standards. So I'm sure all of you have, but a simple Google search of like, where do people who are interested in doing psychedelic work hang out? You'll find a few different online communities. But going to conferences, big or small, has been huge for me. And then there's a lot of cool podcasts out there. No surprise that I'm a fan of podcasts, being a podcast host myself, but a lot of great podcasts. Psychedelics Today, they're great guys. Reed and I have been on their show and had Kyle on ours. They have a lot of good educational resources and community, because they've been around for a long time, been doing the psychedelic education game for a while. So yeah, just off the top of my head, there's a few.
Well, thank you, you three. Excellent insights into your day-to-day and really solid advice for those that are online. I'm going to move us now into the Q&A period. So if you do have a question, please raise your hand or drop it in the chat. I'm going to start making my way through the chat ones now. I see a question in here, and I'll take this one myself. Do you still have therapy in Montreal? So for our Numinus clinics, we no longer operate in Canada, but we have a wonderful partner, Field Trip Health, that has taken over our Montreal clinic operations. And so our patients have transferred over there. I'll also do a quick plug, because this is really relevant, that in these Field Trip Health locations, if you are a new provider or you're coming through training, or again, you want to be able to do psychedelic assisted therapy work, but are very daunted by creating a clinic yourself, or just not sure how to approach it, or want to kind of dip your toe into it and try it out first, the Field Trip Health locations do contract providers who want to, again, use a room or, bring their clients in for a session. So as long as you have that training and you're under the Numinus training umbrella, we can get you sorted with the Field Trip Health clinic locations to do a bit of psychedelic assisted therapy work under their clinic infrastructure to get you set up and feeling a little bit more confident before you set up your own private practice or clinic with psychedelic assisted therapy. So just a little plug for that opportunity under our Numinus training program as well. Elisa, you said it so beautifully. in the chat, but I'm wondering if you don't mind unmuting and just like re-emphasizing your point and anything you want to add to that. Sorry to call on you, but I just like, I saw your note in the chat. I'm like, oh, I would love to hear you personally speak to that if you're comfortable.
Let's see, what did I say? About sitters. I just feel really strongly about this issue. I know everybody's talking about this as well. So just repeating that whether somebody's a therapist or not, I think there should be at least some training in the things that I was saying, basically understanding altered states of consciousness and safety boundaries, ethical guidelines, power dynamics, embodiment practices, and the vulnerable states of clients under psychedelics. So I feel really strongly that people who are sitting with clients should have that, at least some training in that area, even if they're not, a licensed marriage family therapist or something.
Totally agree with you. Totally agree. I'm seeing another question. Are you located exclusively throughout Canada? So no, we operate in both Canada and the US, but like I mentioned, our clinic operations are now based in the US exclusively. So we've transitioned our Canadian clinic operation to Field Trip Health, but our training is for Canadians and Americans. We have accreditation under both the countries there. And then the majority of our clinical research, at least right now, all of our clinical research is happening in the US currently. Next question. I don't think that one's a question, but Belinda, let me know if you did have a follow-up related to the work that you're doing with homelessness and addiction. Asma, I'm seeing your question. Is it complicated with Canada regulations? Interestingly, for psilocybin and MDMA, we have a really good way to access both psilocybin and MDMA through the special access program. So in some ways, I feel like we're less restricted, so we can actually access those psychedelic medicines. Of course, you still need to have a prescriber work with you to apply to Health Canada to get access to them. Sometimes those application approvals are really slow, but at least we have a mechanism for accessing both psilocybin and MDMA in Canada. I know that can be very tricky to do in the US if you're not in Oregon or states that have a psilocybin approval to date. So in some ways, Canada is less restricted. For MDMA, again, everybody's got their fingers crossed what's going to happen for MDMA approval in the US, and we're hoping that shifts in Canada alongside the US. Kind of the timing is similar between the two, but I don't have a crystal ball, unfortunately, and I don't know what that's going to look like in the future. And then for ketamine, it's prescribed off-label for both Canada and the US and widely accessible, so the regulations aren't a barrier in Canada for ketamine either. Kapuli, just noting your note that Zendo Project is a great source for learning for sitting basics. Also Numinus training for sitters. You're allowed to come through the first part of our pathway as someone who's interested in being more of the sitter role. So you're absolutely welcome in our Fundamentals of Psychedelic-Assisted Therapy course with us. Belinda, I'm seeing your question where in the US. So for us, our clinic operations are primarily based in Utah. Steve, do you want to say anything about our US clinic operations?
They are indeed in Utah. We have clinics in Murray, Utah, in Draper, Orem, and Springville, I believe. So 4 clinics along the Wasatch Front.
Great. Sorry, and now I'm looking at the raise your hand. Thank you, Janice, for raising your hand. If you want to go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, I think a price can often be quite a barrier. And so I'm wondering if you see any insurance that's interested in covering this kind of one and which ones that might be. And if not, what's the kind of cost for people to undergo this kind of therapy? I know it would be different for ketamine or for psilocybin or whichever other ones. And I'm just very curious too, when you were talking about, I know this is another question, so I'll just put that aside, but the MDMA, the last time I was with MAPS, they were saying it had not been approved. So I'm curious that you still have a hope.
Maybe we'll start with your first set of questions there, and I'm going to direct that one right to Ray. Ray, can you speak a little bit about ketamine insurance coverage and payment, the price ranges of payment? I know it could be very diverse between clinic to clinic, but can you paint a little bit of that picture for us?
Yeah, so for IV ketamine, intramuscular ketamine, typically it ranges anywhere from 500 to 800 per infusion. The therapy, that ranges as well. As far as insurance coverage, IV ketamine is not typically covered by insurance companies, at least not at this point. However, in the past 2 years since being open, we've recognized, or more insurance companies are starting to recognize ketamine, specifically for those who have major depressive disorder. So sometimes insurance companies may reimburse patients a small percentage after we supply them with a super bill, which is basically an invoice with a procedure code, diagnosis code. But for the vast majority of people, they don't have any help from insurance.
One way that I know some folks have had insurance coverage is through Spravato, the nasal administered ketamine option. I know it's not perfect, but that is another option that folks have explored just because that's what insurance has approved in the US.
Amanda, can I
yeah.
speak to that real quick? So at least in
has approved in the US.
Amanda, can I
yeah.
speak to that real quick? So at least in Utah at the Numinus clinics, we have had Select Health, an insurance provider, agree to a couple single case agreements where they have covered IV ketamine for folks. And I think one or two other insurance plans. So sometimes we can get a single case agreement. Sometimes the insurance company will just, like Ray implied, recognize that ketamine is in the long run cheaper. And so they'll cover it for people. And then there's still talks about when other psychedelics enter the market, how they're going to be made affordable. And so there have been some back and forth between organizations like MAPS and insurance providers to see how we can get this covered. Otherwise, it is going to be expensive.
I'm going to come right back to you with Janice's second question. Can you speak to the group a little bit about when I refer to August 11th and FDA decisions around MDMA? Can you speak a little bit to what has happened in the last couple months and what we're expecting in the next week or so here?
Yeah, so Amanda mentioned the special access program, and that's programs where, in spite of its Schedule I status, a drug like MDMA can be provided to patients, but it's pretty rare and can be difficult. What we're talking about with August 11th, MAPS, now Lykos, the public company, the for-profit company Lykos, has been studying MDMA-assisted therapy for PTSD. They've completed phase 3 studies. They've been working closely with the FDA to get this approved. The FDA there was an advisory committee that met a month or two ago that the FDA gets input from about whether or not to approve a drug. And that, unfortunately, advisory committee majority voted no, not to approve MDMA. But the actual FDA doesn't always take the advice of the advisory committee. So we're still hopeful that when the FDA does rule we've been told by August 11th, so in a few days, that they'll rule in favor. If they don't, they might say we need a little bit more research, or they might approve with conditionally that we have something called a REMS, which Ray, as a physician, knows more about that than I do, but the risk evaluation mitigation strategy that comes along with certain medicines that say, yeah, you can give it, but you have to give it with these certain safety protocols and parameters. So we're all, like Amanda said, crossing our fingers that it gets approved. The entire psychedelic industry, with other medicines, other studies, I think is going to be affected by this decision. But I personally am choosing to stay hopeful because MAPS has been working pretty closely with the FDA on study design since, at least phase 2, maybe even phase 1.
Similarly, yeah. Everything crossed and feeling still a lot of hope. We'll do one more question. I want to recognize that we're a little bit over time, but just want to wrap this up. If I haven't addressed your question, Mark, I'm seeing your question. Christy, I'm seeing your comment there. I'll follow up through email so that you do get your questions answered. But the last one we'll do here, maybe Ray, if you could answer it, giving an example. Have you ever had to turn anybody away from ketamine treatment? And why was it that you had to turn them away?
Yeah, all the time. Yeah, either there's contraindications, there's medical contraindications to ketamine, those being uncontrolled hypertension, unstable heart disease. Some people are in the manic phase of bipolar disorder. So yeah, I turn people down who there's a strong contraindication from a medical standpoint, but also for people who don't really understand, I guess, our intentions with the medicine. They'll perhaps treat it. Ketamine is similar to another antidepressant. They're not really expecting to do much work other than receive an infusion. So I would point those people, I mean, I encourage them to kind of read more about it, do some more homework before they consider this, because they need to understand the medicine. They need to understand there's going to be more work to be done outside of infusions. That's really the key. It's like if they just come in for a single infusion, expecting to be cured, they're going to be disappointed.
Thank you. We're going to wrap it up there on behalf of the whole panel. And I guess everybody watching, thank you, Cindy, Ray, and Steve for such amazing insights and sharing your personal stories in this work. I hope this was helpful to paint a bit of a picture of the types of careers that you can build in psychedelics. I'm going to follow up with some of the links that we put in the chat here, as well as the recording. If you want to watch it again, you want to share it with somebody else, totally okay with us. But otherwise, have a great rest of your day. And just thank you so much for joining. Thanks, everyone.